It looks like we are live and in prime time right now. So, this is going to be an awesome time. We're going to give a minute or two for some people to trickle in, but wanted to introduce everyone on the panel. Of course, we've got the indomitable Joel Cox from Strategus.
Hi, everyone. Pleasure to be here, by the way. Thanks for hosting, Chris.
Of course. Next up, we've got Kendra Allen from Roku.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me, Joel and Chris.
And then last but not least, of course, Lisa Abousaleh from ID5.
Hi guys, happy to be here.
All right. I think it's showtime now. What do you guys think?
Let's do it.
Let's
All right,
roll.
let's do it. We're gonna come in and just jump, 100 feet up off the ground. Also, by the way, I'm Chris Brooklier from The Current, which I'm one of the reporters at The Current. We cover, media, advertising, programmatic, future of TV, anything that you can think of within the digital advertising industry. We've got a beat on it. We're gonna come out really strong and talk about the topic that has dominated advertising conversations and TV conversations is Netflix buying Warner Brothers. I just wanted to get a sense from everyone else. Like, what are you thinking? What were your first thoughts? How do you think this ties in? Give me your top brain thoughts.
I can kick it off.
Mhm.
Um, it was so interesting to wake up to the news. My phone had not had that much excitement that early in the morning in a very long time. But I think it's great. I think it's just validates the shift from linear to streaming and the importance it has um, in our media mix. And it's exciting to see what's to come. And I think it's stirring up a lot of discussions and it's sparking a lot of interest for brands of all sizes.
Totally. Piggyback on that, just to say that I didn't realize Succession on HBO, ironically, it's turned out to be almost a documentary. Seeing all the parallels there has been fascinating and fun to watch unfold. But I also can't disagree with the financials here. Like Netflix has been literally packing away 9 billion a year in free cash flow for opportunities right like this. So I think this is a sign of things to come. But I also applaud it. I think that in the streaming space, Netflix is the clear winner, and they're going to take what they want.
Yep. Yeah, I would think consolidation is a natural evolution of where we're at, and I think as CTV becomes more and more important in the advertising budgets and media mix, I think mergers like this just make sense. So I think it's part of where we're at, now 10 years in.
Mhm.
And just to step back a minute and really introduce why we're here. CTV has been a thing for 10 years now. So we're marking the 10 years of CTV, looking forward to the future, 1 year, 10 years, where we're going to go. And what better way to talk about that than really this exact story, right? I mean, 10 years ago, the first programmatic CTV campaign was run by Joel at Strategus, right? And now we're seeing Netflix completely flip the whole industry and buy Warner Brothers for 72 billion, right? Think about where you were, 10 years ago. It's been such a massive change. On the consolidation piece, how do you think that affects advertisers, or brands? Is there a big difference? What should we be looking for?
Kicking this off from kind of the, demand side perspective, we're just watching this pendulum swing back and forth, right? Fragmentation, consolidation, back and forth. And we've seen some really interesting kind of data points along the way, right? COVID pulled forward a lot of inevitabilities that were going to happen anyway, but just happened faster. All of a sudden, this pivot from subscription based to hybrid, paid, and fast type of apps kind of also marked an interesting inflection point. But I think ultimately, marketers need to be prepared for constant change, constant complexity. And whether it is trying to figure out where your dollars work through a Netflix ecosystem that at some point is probably going to include Warner Bros. Discovery assets, or whether it's trying to figure out how you holistically identify, target, and reach your audiences across a patchwork of apps, I think you just have to prepare yourself that this is going to be a complex type of experience. You got to roll up your sleeves and be ready to do the work But if you do, the dividends are there. The outcomes are worth it.
Well, and I think, Joel, you bring up a good point. What's premium, right? So,
Mhm.
premium versus fast sparks a lot of interest. And I think it was really an interesting point of like what someone's consuming is premium to them, whether that's on fast or it's subscription based. I thought an interesting stat was 64% of Roku households stream fast across a variety of ad supported channels. So there's a place for that. And what's important is that to reach those consumers, whether it's on Roku or another operating system, you need the data, right? You need that data piece to tie it all together to make sure that the dollars that are being spent less, but more of is asked of us, right? And more is asked for brands for us to deliver. And so that data piece is so critical to be able to find those users, whether it's across premium or fast.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, there's so many fast channels, and I think, speaking to lots of different behaviors and interests, which is fantastic. But that can make it challenging from a measurement standpoint. And there's fragmentation as far as signals and, connectivity across operating systems and devices. So I think it's, to the points that you guys made, managing around that fragmentation or through it and finding a way to unify the data, with identity being really the connective tissue that links everything. And then also you have the on the other side of things, first party data, right? And so I think as advertisers are bringing that to the table, that's really a strategic advantage. It really helps you level up. And if done right, and with that connective tissue, it's something that can be activated holistically across the ecosystem, interoperable, can power really powerful campaigns. But it is just, overcoming some of these challenges and being able to manage through them.
And then when we talk about the Roku channel, I mean, it's the number one fast channel according to Nielsen, right? Almost 3% of all viewership is on the Roku channel, right? And it has higher viewership than HBO Max, Peacock, Paramount Plus, right? Honestly, I would have to double check, but it might be more than all of those combined, which is sort of
Yeah.
stunning.
I need you to come on my client pitches. More U.S. households stream fast on Roku than watch TNT, TBS, CNN, and Fox News on a traditional cable. So the Roku channel provides and checks that box for a lot of our consumers. It's free if you have our device. And it gives them that leaned in entertainment, but it also gives them the news angle, their search ability for sports and where their sports is, and so forth. And so we're really focused on that, and we're really helping our brands understand that component to their media buys, because we obviously support the ad supported side and the subscription side. We're the operating system, so we're the entry point into the streamer's journey. But it's really trying to really tie those metrics back. We see a lot of performance-based advertisers want to do brand, and brand advertisers want to do performance. And how do we tie those back together and really build that complexity of a media mix model for them to really succeed, whether it starts on our home screen and goes into that leaned in fast experience, or vice versa, that fast experience going into that ad subscription based.
Yeah, I think it gets at your previous point about what's premium is sort of how you see it, right? What I think is interesting though about the Roku channel is I think a lot of the talk about fast channels is what's the measurement like? What's the audience base like? How much can you know about your audiences? How premium is the ad inventory, right? But what's different about Roku channel is that all of it is logged in and authenticated, right? So then I wonder from Lisa, from your side, how does that change the equation for ad buyers when they get this fast, broad audience, but then they can kind of tie in more data-driven strategies to know about them?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think it's very top of mind right now. We produced our State of Digital Identity report this October, with something we do annually, and over 2/3 of respondents said measurement and cross-channel reconciliation is really their biggest CTV challenge, right? So I think it's recognizing that within all ecosystems. I mean, this is not unique to CTV today, but you do always have this notion of authenticated versus non-authenticated, right? And I think there's benefits to both approaches, right? Like there's plenty of folks that are in both sides of the camp. And so I think it's really being able to leverage the best of both worlds and have unification and enable measurement across all those different environments. And what it takes to do that, I think, is, having a approach to identity resolution and connectivity that can be adaptive, that can work with authenticated signals, right? So if it's a hashed email, or other type of, login signal, but also has the ability to work with other, um, we would call them soft signals, but things like IP address or device ID, like things like that, and be able to be flexible, durable, scalable, and available, and that can work across CTV devices and other digital channels, and I think we're talking a lot about CTV right now, and it's connecting the dots between authenticated and non-authenticated users, but then it's also extending that to be able to make the connections into other channels, whether it's mobile app or on the web, and really having that holistic view of a user's behavior and preferences, and being able to maximize the value of that as they go through their journey.
I think, Lisa, you spoke about it earlier about that first party data, like that, the ownership and that authentication. I think that's really going to be critical. We have evolved tremendously. I've been at Roku for 8 years, so not too far off of the 10-year mark of the CTV era. But we've evolved so much where we're not just only grading our own homework. We have now extended partners like Lisa and others to come in and really validate that first party data is the accuracy, right? And so I think that is also really important for brands to see that it's now being comparable. It's an apples to apples comparison versus an apples to oranges linear to CTV.
Can I just kind of add on a punctuation point to that? And there's a comment in the chat that we need to kind of dumb this down a bit. I will do my best to kind of put the plain English on top of everything we're saying here. And I think that it's that as a marketer, you need to utilize all the tools that are available for meaningful targeting and ad placement, combined with super important achievement of KPIs. Somehow you've got to establish a tech stack that collaborates all of that. And it's no coincidence that you have Strategus, Roku, and ID5 here, because we all essentially play a differentiated role in that patchwork of measurement. But at the end of the day, I think if I'm going to put this into a TLDR kind of summation, it's have your data right and have your CTV right, but ensure that they work together and talk together.
To really fan out here, let's go into what are the biggest shifts that you're seeing within streaming or CTV in 2026, and what's really like the big path forward? What do you think is the most interesting things going on here? Let's get you more involved, Joel. Let's kick it off with you.
Biggest shifts. I think that there remains kind of this undercurrent of undue fixation on content and inventory, right? We kicked the call off talking about Netflix and Warner Brothers Discovery because we all like Squid Game and Batman. But the fact of the matter is that as marketers, you're not going to win on ad placement in Squid Game and Batman and NFL football. You're going to win on your utilization of data to identify and target and reach your audiences with precision and efficiency. And to do that is to do it programmatically. So I think that we're in the midst now of kind of another evolution of connected television, right? We're certainly at the adults table, finally left a little short kids table, if you're going to use that analogy coming out of Thanksgiving. And suffice to say that I think that the biggest shift that we need to be prepared for here is that data in the form of first party, exactly as Lisa described, right? If we're talking to brands, better have your first party data segmented and ready to go such that it can be activated, modeled, excluded, targeted, whatever it may be. But you also need to realize that there's a changing of the guard occurring too with retail and commerce data supplanting third-party cookie-based data in our eyes, right? This isn't full-scale kind of like general adoption yet, but I think in the coming years, we're going to observe that data from the likes of Amazon and Walmart and Kroger and Target and Costco and all these retailers are going to prove to be more valuable and more performant than that from kind of the more commoditized legacy cookie-based data providers. So again, like I can't emphasize enough that I think the big shift is that take your fixation off of the content and the inventory. I know it's cool and all fun to watch, but you're going to win your campaigns based upon the data you're utilizing to target and to measure.
I want to push on back on that because I feel like this is a sentiment that you've said before, Joel, just different times that we've talked, right? Obviously, we know that data is super important. It can really like add and stack onto your campaigns, right? But when we talk about streaming, right,
Mhm.
I think a lot of people are still interested by or excited by, oh, I want to be on Netflix, right? Or I want to be on HBO Max, or I want to be on the Roku channel. So, what is that balance between like not being too performance heavy, as we've seen streaming go to more of a performance channel, while staying still in kind of like a brand build mode? Because obviously, TV in whatever form you see it as is the biggest advertising channel in the world.
I think like any sustainable practice, this requires balance, right? So I don't want to go so far as to say that you can just blindly utilize data and completely exclude any sort of consideration about where your content is serving. We oftentimes entertain RFPs and proposals that request ad placement on specific content inventory, even if it is contrary to the targeting goals, even if it is inefficiently priced relative to what we're able to attain programmatically. But at the end of the day, there's always a balance. We oftentimes see good success with setting up programmatic deal IDs that are biddable and audience-based decisionable, but nevertheless focus only on certain buckets of content, right? Whether that be the Disney umbrella of content, whether that be Roku's umbrella of content. So we at least have certainty that our inventory that we're accessing is professionally produced, long form, non-user generated. But within that, we're still extremely selective about who is seeing the impression. And I think that's kind of where the fine line is. And none of that really occurs without identity resolution and identity spine to help us essentially cherry pick between completely disparate inventory sources and silos of content, only the audiences that our clients need to be reaching.
I think, when you asked the question too, it spurred the thought for me. So it's fine to have a strategy like let's place our advertisements on this premium video content, right, on this channel or the other. But you're missing out on opportunities if it ends there, right? And I guess what I mean by that is there's so much more. So you have a placement on Netflix, and there's always been this idea of like co-viewing within the TV space, but there's also co-device behavior too, right? When we move in the digital world, and so I think it's sure buy that placement on premium content on Roku or Netflix, but with the realization that viewers are not sitting there just glued to the TV. We have our mobile phone in our hand or our laptop open, and so capitalizing on those opportunities to be able to connect that TV exposure downstream and help achieve the campaign objectives with whether it's app installs or purchase or even like in-store behavior, and so monetizing it based on that and helping to make those connections I think is really important. Even if your upstream is just a branding play or something higher funnel, it's really important to also think about the full impact throughout the user journey.
Well, and I think too, pricing comes into this. Whether you're a local mom and pop shop or you're a national brand, when you're in a programmatic bidding capacity, they're not going to always win. So being able to have opportunities for your brands and to be still in that and play in that, but maybe not go to the Netflix, but find them when they're across their streaming journey elsewhere. So I think it's really important, and that's where the data comes in because you can say, I can maybe pay less, but still find them and reach them. To your point, they're not always glued to their television at every given moment. So you can, really find them in different aspects of their day. And I think COVID really helped us surge and accelerate to understand that user behavior more so because we had so many people at home, right? So I think that our algorithms let us,
Mm.
unfortunately, during that unfortunate time, learn certain things about how we go about targeting.
Let's keep pushing on the shifts. Kendra, Lisa, what are your thoughts on biggest shifts in 2026 for streaming?
I think that you're going to see more and more shoppable capabilities. We're going to be pushing that really hard to really kind of see if it works, right? We've gone through QR codes. Our best kept known secret is our OK on our
Mm.
on our remote because everything is pre-populated from our registration, but understanding, how can we bring shoppable to the forefront. And it might not be that they buy it on our television, but they buy it through their mobile device. But being able to tie those, I think, are going to be really important. I also think that we're going to start seeing more and more, not just at Roku, but across ads manager formats where self-serve and CTV is going to be brought to every buddy and available, whether that's, the Facebook ads manager, Google, Roku, so forth. I think that's a really big topic of interest for brands to have that self-serve capacity.
I think shoppable is interesting, right? Because we've kind of seen it's bubble up in the last couple of years. You hear about, shoppable ads on Roku, on other places, and it's this interesting conversation between, okay, we don't want to bring just like traditional TV ads and put them straight on to streaming and that's it, right? Because there's so much more ability for innovation. But you have to make sure that it's like authentic and that it fits. When it comes to all that, like, do you have any thoughts, Lisa?
Um, I think from a consumer standpoint, less so from the business side of things. I don't, Kendra, maybe you do it as far as formats. I guess I would just say like I think it's still in early stages, and we're still seeing the industry test out different approaches. I think the vertical and the type of product being offered matters, right? When you're thinking about shoppable on CTV versus, is that something more downstream? So I think it kind of goes back to the objectives of the campaign and the right format and the right, brand have to kind of align. But I think we're still in early stages, and we probably haven't seen the extent of what, retail media or commerce in CTV looks like.
I can't help it if I could piggyback onto the concept of shoppability. Like, I think we all agree that there needs to be a more performant element to connected television advertising, right? We can't have just literally shifted an entire way that we all view and monetize television from linear and cable into streaming without expecting some degree of improvement for us as marketers. But I also don't necessarily know that I or us as television watchers have a huge amount of interest in actually like buying things on our TV, right? Like I know that Roku's done really well with their pre-programmed remote, right? And QR codes maybe are this stepping stone, but we've also nevertheless been trained as consumers to engage off of search and social primarily, right? When we're ready to make a decision, those are proven to be kind of the most tantamount solutions to generating conversion activity. So it's almost like egotistical to think that CTV is just going to supplant or replace or augment that entire thing that we as consumers have been trained for 25 years to utilize to buy. And I think, again, the name of the game here is acknowledging the other elements of the ecosystem that very importantly play a role, right? Like if I'm a millennial and I've seen these memes recently of like a millennial opening a laptop because they got to make the big purchase, right? They don't feel comfortable making the big purchase on a phone. They feel more comfortable doing it on a laptop. I think that somewhat exists here, where if we can understand the linkage between Lisa seeing an ad on CTV and then subsequently purchasing a product via search on her MacBook, the linkage there, I think, is more compelling for us as marketers and more likely for us as consumers to be the way that we buy and the way that we shop in the future. Again, that's, I think, why we're so like the name of the game. Clearly, the buzzword today is like data and how you're going to utilize that, because that seems to be such an important yet overlooked. Like we can't look at CTV as the silo where everything is going to occur within just that television experience.
And maybe it's not, purchasing actually through the connected television, but making it easier to do so in whatever your preferred channel is. So when you have the connection of the CTV to your mobile device, to your laptop, or I can click a button or give a voice prompt that says like, add this to my shopping cart, in this app or whatever, I think that's where it can become powerful. Is anything that saves you time. I don't have to type it in a URL or, search for it myself. So I think maybe that's where we could see some interesting things evolve.
So Lisa, does that mean, and I apologize, jump in like I'm the host or something. I am no Chris, but I apologize. I got to ask, does that mean Amazon's the winner here, right? Does anyone have more of a closed loop to be able to say, hey, you're watching Prime Video inventory, you're signed in on your phone and we're selling stuff you want. Is there any other potential rival in that space?
Yeah, I don't know today, but I mean, you could foresee a future. I don't know, with the right partnerships. Target is advertising something, right? Like I have the Target app on my phone, so can there somehow be a connectivity? You know,
And you got the
but
Vizio Walmart acquisition. I mean, you just,
There you go. Yeah.
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Vizio Walmart might be totally.
But I think it goes back to, and I am so thankful that at Roku we focus on streaming. We want to do streaming the best. We want to figure out the streaming component. You go back to the Amazon, they've got so many different facets, right, that they're focused on. And I understand that connection, but not all brands want to be in that space. And not all brands, want to just put all their eggs in that basket. And so I still think there's a need for operating systems outside of Amazon to really still understand that infrastructure. And I still think there's tie-in through data, through that logged in experience and all the ACR that we sit on and other operating systems sit on. That they can be able to connect those dots in a format that they can buy however they want to buy.
I think there's also so many different types of retail data partnerships that you can connect with, Target's Roundel, Walmart, and the there's what over 200 retail media networks.
Mhm.
So I think you have to look at the companies that have that, right? Um, I'm a Trade Desk employee, right? Full disclosure. So I think the Trade Desk is obviously a great player there. One other thing is we are opening up for questions, so you can throw it in the chat, you can throw it in the Q&A, and then we'll answer it probably about 12:45. We do have some questions that we already got, so we can try to answer those as well. But any questions you got, throw them in. Moving on, I guess since we're already in the retail space, I feel like 2024 was like a huge year for the merging of retail and CTV, right? We found out that this was such an emerging space and possible, and then they can really be peanut butter and jelly for each other. But for 2025, I guess I haven't seen as much momentum and as much motion. I guess how do you all view that partnership between retail and CTV? Are we fully there? And what's coming down the pike? Is there anything that you see?
So Strategist has a pretty unique perspective on this because it's our intention to be kind of the entry point for SMBs to access the entire gamut of retail and commerce data, whether that be the top of the pyramid of Amazon, as we've discussed, is the most mature and the most scalable and the most closed loop, all the way through to Walmart and we talked about Target, Roundel, United Airlines, Costco, you name it, all the way to the lower absolute long tail of kind of like almost like you giggle when you hear the brands like Chuck E. Cheese and 7-Eleven have retail and commerce data, right? And all that comes to mind first and foremost is just like, does everyone need a podcast? Does everyone need to be a retail commerce data provider? Debatable. But I think, Chris, to your point, like things have gotten a little bit quiet despite the fact that dollars continue to grow because this is a super nascent industry and ecosystem. Like it is in dire need of standardization and of aggregation, right? I think that what was successful about the predecessor to retail and commerce data, which is, DMP-based, third-party, commoditized, heavy cookie-based data, was at least it was interoperable. You could stack or Boolean 3 or 4 or 5 segments on top of each other. Say you're trying to reach, an affluent individual who plays tennis, who takes European vacations because you want to sell them a Lexus. You could stack all those together. The retail and the commerce data doesn't yet have that degree of sophistication, let alone the cost component is sometimes prohibitive. And so I think we're very much in an exploratory phase. The dollars are nevertheless shifting from a lot of different kind of retail expenditure allocations, right? People are spending less on end caps and coupons and allocating those funds into retail data, which is great for the retailers themselves, much higher margin. But nevertheless, I think that we're at a phase now where it is so much basically like throw it against the wall and see what sticks. Find the partners that work better for you. Find the ones that offer you the closed loop attribution or as close to that as you can for your sales and KPI achievement. But I think we're years out from any degree of maturity in the space.
How do we When we think about that, right, I think a lot of what you're talking about is kind of tied into measurement and everything like that. And this somewhat goes back to what we were just talking about a couple minutes ago with the shoppable TV and where do you buy on which channel and do you buy it immediately? Do you not? Are we fully there with measurement in an omni-channel way? Let's say if like streaming is a large base of it, right? Like if I see an ad on whichever streaming network, and then a week later I buy it through the laptop, which I did do on the weekend.
Mhm.
I pulled out that laptop because I'm also a true millennial. Uh, are we fully there with omni-channel measurement? Is it still something that needs to get better in terms of streaming?
I don't think we're there yet. I'll say it. And I think, it comes down to some of the things we've already touched on, the fragmentation, the need for data to help support that measurement. I think from a identity lens, it comes down to, what's available to help with making those identity connections in CTV and how is it being leveraged. Early days, IP address was viewed as this is the solve. That's no longer a viable option for CTV measurement and targeting. I'm sure everyone here on the panel has seen, but there was a recent study from Go Addressable and SIM powered by TruthSet, and IP to email match rates are like abysmal. 16% on average are they actually accurate? And so I think that as the ecosystem evolves, it's really just like rethinking that approach and redefining and having some standardization around measurement, both on the inputs, but then also like the KPIs and the outputs. And really, when we think about CTV, what is and we touched a little bit on like, is it performance media? Is it brand, awareness play? Like I think it's, having some alignment on what those metrics are as well.
I think a lot of the tools are still very much tailored to a linear buy. I have a client that will compare, you know, their linear TV buy to their CTV buy, and he knows that he needs to be in CTV. He for years has called it his insurance policy, and it's kind of flipped now, and it's his most successful in a TV like instance. But before then, years ago, he would call it his feel it moment. When his ad was served on in an NFL Thursday night game, he could feel it immediately, and he couldn't see that instance for CTV for a few days. So that instant, gratification was happening, and it was taking a little bit longer. So I think to Lisa's point, we need to catch up and have it in the lens of linear, but transact in the ways of digital. And I think that's where we need to get, and we need to bridge that in order for CTV to have that feel it moment.
How far away are we from that?
I don't think we're far. I think we need to get out of our ways and stop competing against each other and work together. I think once
Mhm.
we can open up, the wild gardens, and I think we're doing that more. You're seeing more brands do that. We're bringing players in here. I think we're seeing more of that evolve and happen faster. We're about to go into our largest some of our largest activation period with tax, and so they have a condensed time period of how much they can do, and there's so many players that run that space, and you're seeing them take over the linear to CTV to social, and they're having to gap that so they're not capitalizing on one another, and their dollars are being spent. And so I think we've learned a lot through that vertical on how we can really have that feel it moment so that we can be quick because we only have so much time till April 15th. So I think we're getting there. We're seeing some stuff there that's really exciting, and I think we'll see that across CPG and other auto and so forth.
If I could just punctuate this by saying that like we're we're kind of commemorating, if not acknowledging, if not celebrating 10 years of CTV, certainly programmatic CTV, right? And so part of me can't help but look back to 10 years ago when so much of the measurement and attribution was fractional of what it is today, right? We think about, in the early days, for us to be able to place a pixel on a website and just understand that somebody saw a non-skippable CTV ad and came to an advertiser's website was like you jump up and you high five your team. And now we're to a point where it's not just that they saw the ad in a non-clickable environment and came to a website, but now we can understand what they specifically looked at on the website, right? In the context of auto, Kendra, it was like, okay, now we understand they're looking at this particular VDP of a make, model, and VIN. And then we can attach that to another integration to say this subset of people actually physically went and visited a car dealer. And then this subset of people physically bought a car according to Experian's North American Vehicle Database. And to stitch and weave all of that together, we still look at it and still, not the smoothest operation, but when we think about 10 years ago, if you guys gave me a magic wand and said, hey, fix measurement of CTV, I don't know that I would have even been able to envision a solution that here we are 10 years later providing on a regular basis. So it's incredibly exciting because I agree that I don't think we're super far away from a point where this is as dialed in as search and social may be today. But it's going to be really interesting to watch it unfold.
Progress, not perfection, right?
Totally.
Always moving the ball forward. When we keep talking about this measurement conversation, right? We've made some nods to the walled gardens, right? How do you think about measurement, or I guess the limited amount of measurement that you're getting from walled gardens, and making some of the connections that you can get outside of the walled gardens, which honestly for streaming is a bigger chunk than some other channels, right? Because there's so much fragmentation that sort of leads to a lack of dominance by the walled gardens. How do you see it all?
I don't want to be the one to chime in on this, but I'll give my 2 cents. Like that is a really hard one for us to solve, right? We're fundamentally Strategus prides itself on being programmatic, inventory platform, content agnostic. But that means that inevitably participation in ad placement in some of the walled gardens, YouTube TV being two of the most prominent, are sometimes essential. Yet it's so frustrating to not have parity and holistic measurement across the board that we're leaning heavily on our identity resolution partners to help us figure out a patchwork of data to try and solve for that. But frankly, I think that the walled gardens potentially, especially with what Netflix decides to do with its own first party tech and the acquisition of Warner Brothers Discovery, like we're probably headed for a future that is heavily dominated by tech oriented walled gardens with just a sidecar of programmatically available inventory. It's frankly quite vexing. Lisa, I'm curious for your perspective on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's no different than challenges in the digital web, right? I mean, I think you still have the walled gardens there. You still have challenges with getting, one measurement solution that can measure across all the channels. So I think it's again trying to progress things as much as possible, but also, for the other portion, where you do have control, you do have access to that data, and looking for partners that can work with different types of data and make those connections and help with interoperability, both from the data standpoint, but also on where that media is being bought, and working with platforms that having that flexibility. I think it comes down to optionality and just trying to maximize. Now, obviously, you don't want to go so far, and then you have too many partners that you're trying to manage. So it's that fine balance between, okay, we know we're going to invest our money in the walled gardens, but we're also going to, have a portion of the campaign that we're going to leverage through these other channels, and finding that balance, and trying to continue to push the narrative on that measurement piece.
All right. I think in a few minutes we'll get into some of this Q&A. I think another question that I really had for you all is what's one thing that advertisers are underestimating about streaming right now, right? We've seen it move from, I'm thinking 10 years ago, I was probably watching Netflix on my laptop, right? I don't even think I watched it on my TV at all. To now it's a $33 billion industry. We've seen that streaming viewership overtook broadcast and cable for the first time ever this year, right? Streaming ad spend is projected to pass linear ad spend for the first time ever in a couple years. So it's massive. But what's one thing that some advertisers are underwhelming?
I think that a lot of brands, and there's that education piece of people want to go back and watch the content to them again, going back to their what's premium to them or nostalgic. We're seeing that what terms are being number one searched. We have Landman, Bluey, Laguna, and The Office, right? Those are all different variations, right? And so I think what people are underestimating is not everybody wants to go and watch the number one thing launched on a Netflix or a Paramount or an HBO. We're seeing apps churn and subscriptions, free trials rise and then drop and so forth. So I think the one thing that's underestimated is people want to go back and consume things that are staples, Seinfeld, Friends, things like that. And I think there's a purpose to be around those brands. And to Joel's point about like the content piece of it, they're underestimating like how much is out there. There's so much to find, and that if you have a good search functionality, you're gonna win in the game, in the space, because it'll bring everything that you have housed there to the forefront.
And then I think that's a positive, but it also makes measurement so much tougher, right? I think when we talk about fast channels, like what, I don't even know how many there are, 200, something like that. Um, Lisa, from your side, like when I was growing up, we had the channel numbers memorized, right? I'm watching ESPN on channel 37, right? And then the Cartoon Network changes channels, and then I have to figure it out. That's not the case really anymore, right? How does I guess this goes into somewhat of what you've been talking about with fragmentation, but how does just the overwhelming amount of options that we have make measurement and identity solutions tougher?
Yeah, so I think it comes down to there's different channels, there's different operating systems, right? There's different models by which how content is monetized, right? So directly through the content owner, or it's licensed to someone else. So I think there's a lot of fragmentation and complexity. I mentioned earlier about some of the signals that are used to try to connect those dots, right? So to understand the cross-channel viewership. So there's signal fragmentation within CTV, and I mentioned IP address, and that's just something that there's gaps in availability. There's IP rotation. There's reassignment of IP addresses, right? So there's a lot of things that are going on in the background that make it more challenging. Like we don't have third-party cookies, which put that whole argument aside, but at least like on digital, right? Like on the web, that was like a consistent identifier that you could use. And so I think with CTV, in order to be able to make those connections and really understand the behavior, it's having a approach and a framework to identity that can take these into account, right? So have the understanding of IP rotation, or isn't relying just on IP as a signal. You also have device IDs are another option, right? That people would use, but those are inconsistent as well. There's varying availability across different OEMs, app environments. Then there's privacy on top of this, right? So again, these are all things that keep us up at night at ID5, because you also have privacy frameworks, and privacy is a big thing top of mind, not only for the media owners themselves, but also the advertisers. Like, okay, are we advertising in an environment that respects user consent preferences and those types of things? So I guess that's a long-winded way of answering your question, is that there's a lot of factors at play. They're not unsolvable, but it's just making sure that you're working with partners that can help support you in understanding the behavior, understanding the measurement across the channels, with these things in mind, though, and has options for being able to truly get to the omni-channel cross device end all be all goal that we're all looking towards having the understanding for.
All right, let's move on to some Q&A questions. We got a question. Someone asked about co-viewing. Co-viewing is really just multiple people are watching, in a room, and trying to track who those people are. Um, Moving on to the next one. Has there been any talk of retargeting viewers who interacted with shoppable TV and did not purchase?
Uh, I can field this one first. I'm sure we each have unique perspectives and they all kind of weave together. But Strategist has a product called Encore Omnichannel, which is the process of deterministically retargeting somebody from a CTV ad exposure to the more clickable, trackable, scalable devices such as these and others that are seemingly glued to our hands and pockets at all times. And so the ability to essentially take that a step further and say that somebody engaged with a shoppable ad but did not purchase is very much in our roadmap, such that if we can understand not only whether somebody purchased a shoppable or engaged meaningfully in a shoppable experience, it not only warrants retargeting, but it potentially warrants sequential retargeting, where we continue the conversation based upon the fact that somebody has expressed enough interest to engage to some degree. It's insulting the intelligence and the time of our viewers if we don't say, okay, cool, you know this much about our brand and our product and our service. Now let's tell you this, and let's give you another incentive to engage or shop or purchase or convert. And so that's very much where the puck is going, so to speak. Whether that be a strategist or with my co-parts here, I think that that's inherently something that we're going to have much more functionality in 2026.
We're doing that pretty much with all of our campaigns with our home screen units. So we're tagging those from our own proprietary pixeling, and then we're able then to bundle that and put it through a deal ID, and then allow brands to programmatically either retarget or even suppress that audience that might have already transacted. So we don't want to continue to keep hitting the same person. We're able to manage that frequency. And so we're able to bundle that in a deal ID, and then at your choice where you want to run that programmatically, then you're able to layer that on from a targeting perspective.
All right, next one coming up from Doug Michalak. Hopefully I said your name right, at NBC Universal. How do you see publishers best monetizing their audience without cannibalizing themselves? This is in the context of letting third-party companies sell their ad inventory.
I can take that one too. So we have publisher agreements, channel partner agreements with all of our top 100 apps. And we have a rev share. So what is partitioned out for certain publishers that we're able to sell is different and unique to others. And then we're utilizing that frequency that we place on all of our campaigns, the 3 to 5. So yes, there will be some overlap, but it's very minimal. And we're tracking that. All of our channel partners provide us that data to overlap one another. So our algorithms are making sure that we're not hitting the same user at the same time. And a lot of the time, when we know someone's buying direct with an app, we'll blacklist that app, particular that inventory. But a lot of the times, we're seeing such a minimal overlap that brands don't want to basically completely turn off something and just run it all together to let the algorithm find the audience.
All right, next one. We're going to go with Mickey Fain from Stone Side Blinds and Shades. He's president there. He says, how accurately can we track the true return on ad spend with CTV? And what are the valid return on ad spend results that are being realized today?
I'd love to give Lisa a chance to field this, but I also have a great answer. So
No,
please
go for it, Joel. Go for it.
I think ROAS is inherently at this point pretty well understood. I think the devil's in the details of how do you understand and measure your ROAS holistically, so as to not look at CTV as one silo and search as another and social as another and traditional as another, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But to kind of understand the overlap and the lift that can occur there. So I know that strategists and others have solutions in which we're able to not only demonstrate CTV's individual ROAS calculation, but just as importantly, understand the lift and the ROAS it's generating across the rest of the tools that exist within a marketer's cliche tool belt, if you will. So I think we're there. I think what now becomes kind of the exercise and the fun part is fine tuning that and determining what creative executions move the needle. What inventory choices or lack thereof may move the needle, right? Does all of a sudden playing a campaign in Netflix where your CPM is 2x anywhere else, does that move ROAS up or down, right? And so there, I think we're at the point now where we're just fine tuning and optimizing that calculation. And obviously that's done with a whole hefty amount of identity resolution.
Yeah, and I also think it's understanding the incrementality, right? So it is what's the unique reach and what's also, the opportunity to increase the frequency for audiences that might have seen the advertisement elsewhere. So I think that's part of the equation as well, right? Is this a new user that the only time you've seen them has been on, this channel on the CTV device? And so yeah, I would just add that as another consideration.
Anything to add, Kendra?
Nope. Y'all did a great job.
All right. I agree. Um, okay. Let's move into some more fun parts. Not that this hasn't been fun. But as we go into like a crystal ball, right, and you think about the next, like 10 years of CTV, like really long term, 5, 10 years from now, do you have any sense of like what the industry is going to look like then? You know, um, what do you see, right? I feel like because I can't imagine what it's going to look like in 10 years. Do you ever think about that? Any of you?
I, yeah, regularly. I think that this is a world where we're watching right now. We've had front row seats to the absolute once in a generation evolution from how arguably the most important cultural zeitgeist to the nation of what are you watching on TV has pivoted out of a linear and cable system into streaming. I think the changing the guards will similarly occur with tech supplanting traditional legacy media. We're seeing this already, right? And like Netflix, for the proverbial change in their couch cushions, just scooped up some of the most valuable remaining Hollywood assets. I think we're going to continue to see that. I think Apple is a sleeping giant right now, right? They're fomenting a closed, absolutely unreachable yet ultra premium audience ecosystem of Apple and iOS users, and are going to essentially be able to have a monetizable, high quality streaming inventory base, along with closed loop attribution and measurement, could potentially rival Amazon in my eyes. And we're also seeing the change in the guard from old school cookie based data into first and second party data. So I think we're looking at a completely changed ecosystem in the next 10 years.
I think creative is going to play a really pivotal point too. And we haven't really addressed it, but AI, right? Like, how does that really make things faster and complex and everything, right? So, um, a lot of it keeps me up at night. I want to know, I want to be ahead of it. I don't want to be behind it. And I've been excited to be at the forefront and to see it. I said I've been here 8 years. When I first joined, we had 10 million active users. We're over 100 million. So,
Wow.
think about how fast that's come. And I think it's going to get really interesting how quickly even a phone can record something and produce a commercial, right? So these are the types of things I think will even be accelerated in the next 5 years, if not sooner.
Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna say I was also gonna mention AI because I feel like it's not a webinar without the mention of AI these days. But I think we think of evolution around three areas. Some I've already mentioned, but I'll just recap. So identity being the connective layer, right? So it's important to have stable first party identifier or privacy first focused identifier that can make the connections, unify data across publisher signals, and enable advertising with agencies and brands. First party data continues to be a strategic advantage. It becomes more and more valuable in a direct path for more accurate targeting, suppression, and measurement. And then I think AI is the third pillar that we're also thinking about. And so it's not a replacement for any of the above, but is really an accelerator. And it can help with, automating predictive audiences, forecasting intent, creating lookalike models, powering more efficient planning, right? You name it. And so I think just across the ecosystem, but even specifically relevant to CTV, it's just how do we harness those tools and use it for efficiency and better results. And maybe that gets back to the question too with like measurement. I think, how does that fit in and help enable, better results or better measurement outcomes?
Yeah, AI. Um, I was talking with someone yesterday, and they were talking about AI, and we were kind of like, AI is a little bit like the boogeyman. It's a little bit of a scary word, right? But when he used automation, the word automation instead of the word AI, right? Suddenly, that's not as
Triggering. Mhm.
triggering. Yes,
Yeah.
great, great call.
Provocative.
Because it's just like
Yeah.
it's so institutionalized, right? You're just like, this is how it happens, right? But when you say AI, it's like there's replacement that feels worrying. Um, Kendra, like you mentioned creative and AI, do you see the biggest transformation being more like the ad formats that can be created because of AI? Like taking whatever one ad and turning it into 50, or is it more the creation of ads through AI?
I think it's the latter. I think it's so much of the time we can't turn something around quick enough because they don't have the assets in the CTV lens format, right? So I think AI is accelerating that and allowing them to make different files, formats for all different, whether it's social, digital, linear, CTV, and so forth. And so I think it's just the ability to be quicker, and then take that and modify it, just tweak it, right?
Mhm.
To make it for a Roku or for an Amazon. So many of us have just minor tweaks in how we deliver things, and it's a lot of time
Hmm.
for a creative agency. So I think
Yeah.
it's allowing them um, to be quicker and to be more efficient. And then if there is an error, we can get revisions and optimizations quicker.
Mhm.
I'm going to speak for all video editors and producers in the world, where that is going to be awesome, right?
Yeah.
Because changing the slight changes are really difficult. Want to pick
Absolutely.
off
And they take time.
one more thing from the chat. This is from Steve Tomanchek from the Media Hawk Group. He's asking, what do you see as far as ad activation during live content, not just ad breaks, for advertisers? And is is anyone offering that currently? I think this probably goes more towards like live sports, right? Rather than that's probably the biggest arena that I could see that in. But is that something that you guys think about, Joel? Getting into like during games instead of just while the commercial breaks are happening.
I think our we get posed this and similar questions frequently, and live sports is a really interesting and compelling element of CTV, right? And it kind of was in my eyes like one of the final firewalls that once live sports really became scalable in CTV, like it was over for linear. And oftentimes the inventory, nevertheless, is really hard to access. It's difficult to pace and optimize. You essentially sometimes have to be hands-on keyboard during the game to make sure you're able to dynamically get your ads placed. That we entertain that and utilize that when appropriate, but something that we do a lot, which hopefully this is full circle because it relies on partners like Kendra and Lisa at Roku and 95, is utilizing automatic content recognition data to acknowledge and engage with the fact that we know this is a heavy NFL live football watching household, but we also realize the fact that everyone watching NFL football in that household has this device and others glued to their hand. And so, why would we be one dimensional in only trying to slam jam CTV ads at a very high cost, very high frequency, no ability to FCAP type of situation when we could instead augment that campaign with display and online video ad placements in their fantasy football app that we know they're checking 3 times a quarter, right? And how do we essentially continue to engage utilizing identity resolution and automatic content recognition data to engage across that entire sports watcher's experience, right? And I'll sum it up with this. We know the most staunch fans of a given, sports franchise at best can watch one NFL game of their team a week. That's 3 hours, give or take, of content. But we know that individuals watching north of 12 hours of content in any given week. So how can we utilize data and identity resolution to find and engage that individual? Sure, during live sports events, with tentpole is going to be the most expensive, hardest to pace, sometimes hardest to measure. But then how do we continue the conversation before and after across other devices?
And I think, too, to your point, a lot of brands are blocked because they're not OMPs, so official marketing partners, right? So for those that aren't, how do you find them again across that streamer's journey is going to be very critical. And it goes back to the data. It's finding that data, collecting that data back on that ACR piece, and allowing the opportunity just to be surrounded without having to be in the exact live instance.
Mhm.
I think that's a good way to wrap it up. This has been an awesome hour. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Lisa, Joel, and Kendra. Thanks for everyone watching in the audience. And I hope you all have a great day.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Chris.
thank you, Chris.
Thank
Been a lot
you.
of fun.
Bye-bye.
Bye.